So I'm going to start recording. There we go. We are now recording. All right, so shade perennials. Sorry, folks, I'm reading some chat messages here. Shade perennials. Shady places are often drier due to overhangs, trees, and rain-blocking structures. Extra watering is often necessary, okay? The reason why we mention that is because you will have people that have tried for years and years and years to plant something underneath an overhang that gets no water and gets no sun, and they were going to come to you and they're going to say, find me a plant that will work here, okay? There's no plant that is going to survive there without some human intervention, i.e. you watering it, okay? So just make sure that when you're talking to people about shade plants and shady perennials, plants for shaded spaces, ask them that question, and then you might be able to troubleshoot with them a little bit, okay? You can say, hey, is that an overhang? Does it get water? Is there a downspout nearby? Are you planning on watering it? Just something that you can do to help them out and troubleshoot that for them, okay? Because you're inevitably going to get that question a lot. Nothing survives here, and it's a barren desert, that's why. All right, shade gardens are often out of bloom and pure green, right? You see the shade, it's just like this green mass, okay? What you wanna do is look for texture. This is why hostas are so popular, okay? Hostas have a lot of different shades within their leaves, right? You've got light green and dark green and chartreuse and all kinds of stuff, right? So one of the things that I do when I'm talking to folks about a shady place is before you talk about flowers, is talk about leaves, okay? Talk about what you can actually do out of flower, because most of the time they're gonna be out of flower anyway. Astilbes are gorgeous when they're blooming, right? They've got these big, beautiful blooms. There's pink astilbes in this photo here. But those blooms last for like a week and a half. And then you have the whole rest of the summer of just green, okay? So you wanna be looking at plants for a shady place that are going to have a lot of texture and a lot of different shades of green, whether it's silvers or white or what have you, okay? There we go. All right, so now we're gonna get into some of the plants that are gonna be available. This is a really cool one. If you like chartreuse plants. This is a juga, cordial canary. Okay, so, and by the way, I've got the scientific and the name that it's supposed to be on the left, and then the common name on the right. So cordial canary bugleweed. Everybody familiar with this plant? Yep. Anybody online? They're typically a really, really dark green. They typically have ruffled leaves. Some of them are purple. This is a newer cultivar that provides a lot of bright color for a shady spot, right? A juga is a nice plant, but it's a very dark plant, very dark leaf plant. So this is a great one that you can fill into a dark space and get some color even when it's not in bloom, okay? Cold hardy and easy to grow both in shade and part sun. If it is in full sun, it'll probably burn it out. A lot of chartreuse colored plants can't handle the full sun, okay? There's an Aralia racemosa, I believe it is, that's called Sun King, and it is a chartreuse plant, and it is supposed to be able to handle the sun. You go any further south than Minnesota, and it doesn't do very well in the sun, okay? So just something to keep in mind. Any questions about that one? Okay, got about a half hour left, so I think we'll be good to go with the slides here.
Oh, I'm sorry, was that developed?
No, it was not developed at the Arboretum. Yeah, by the way, a lot of these plants are just developed in other places. The question online, everybody, was it developed here at the Arboretum? I do believe I included like 1 or 2 plants down the line that were developed by the University of Minnesota, but not here.
I'm sorry, a follow-up question. Were they, are plants that are developed, that have been developed at the Arboretum, are they marked as such? Or say if somebody's asking, I don't know if they'll ask that question.
So the question was, are the plants that were developed at the Arboretum that we may or may not have available here at the sale, are they going to be marked as such? I do not believe so. That would be a really nice marketing ploy, but a lot of the plants, again, are just coming from various wholesale vendors, and they're not necessarily going to be marked for anything special. But that would be cool if we did that in the future, right? Something to kind of think about. We could even mark them with like a flag or something, be like, hey, call them out. All right, I don't know what. Oh, Sharon says, yes, there will be some tags on our own introductions. There we go. Thank you, Sharon. Appreciate that. I'm struggling with my technology here, so I apologize, folks. All right. I might have to move. Yes. Okay, let's, there was a question, or there was a comment on, in the room here. I'm gonna go ahead and,
So if those introduction that were U of M research introductions are planted on the grounds, it's interesting for people to see. They have a red maroonish tag instead of a black tag.
Okay.
So they're easy to cite.
excellent, thank you very much. These are all the things that we're working out for next year, right? We can figure out how we can improve this talk and how we can improve some of our things going forward. All right, so this next one is Heucherella. Heucherella is a hybrid between a Heuchera and a Tiarella. So you can see how they put the two words together, right? So the cultivar name is Hupire 030, but they're gonna be called Pink Revolution Foamy Bells. Foamy Bells are the name for the hybrid. Easy to grow ground cover that produces loads of pink flowers. Great for small pollinators. By the way, the native bees love Heuchera. They've got these little tiny flowers, right? And native bees absolutely go wild for them. They don't bloom for a huge amount of time, but when they do, they're really showy. The other thing that's great about these guys is, again, in the shade, you want something that's gonna have texture, right? They've got kind of this maple-shaped leaf. And then not only are they dark green, but they've got the purple veining as well, okay? All right, I might sit down here so people can actually see me. I don't know why this thing does not want to work. No, a little bit closer. No, none of you are doing anything wrong. All right, there we go. All right, Mukjinia Nova Flame. Anybody familiar with these? No? Some? Mukjinias are pretty cool. They are a hybrid between Mukdinia and Berginia. Again, you just kind of plop those two names together, right? Cool plants. They do have nice leathery leaves. They will stay for quite a while in the fall. Some of them, if you're further south, for example, they will be evergreen all throughout the year. Berginias will do that. If we have a really, really cold winter, they'll die off completely, and then they'll resprout in the spring. But very easy to grow. They've got the nice leaves, again, nearly evergreen. Pink flowers upwards of 13 inches. So they do have a little bit of a show in the shade for you. Okay. I don't know if there's a lag or if I'm just in the wrong spot. There we go. All right, now we're gonna jump to ferns. So ferns require lots of shade. There are some that can do really well in the sun, but I'm sure all of you are familiar with like ostrich ferns, right? They'll start off in a shady area and then they grow out into the sun. And the ones that are grown out in the sun look like heck, right? They start to look tattered and torn. The best thing you can do for them is keep them in a shaded spot, and that way they're not tattered and torn by the sun, right? Lots and lots of water. Keep them very moist throughout the entire season, especially if we are in a drought. You want to make sure that you're giving them extra water, okay? Even our native ferns will go dormant and they'll kind of die back or even look just kind of tattered and torn for the year if they don't get that little extra. They'll survive, but they're not necessarily going to look great, okay? Note that some of the ferns are going to be clumpers. They're going to grow in just a nice little clump. Some of them are going to be runners. Ostrich ferns are runners, okay? They are going to go all over the yard. And the ferns like to be planted and left alone. Kids and pets and ferns do not mix at all, okay? Especially if you get down to some like the maidenhair ferns and whatnot. They don't like to be touched, even the wind, okay? They're not that fragile, but they don't look great once they're tattered and torn, okay? All right, I'm gonna move over here again. We will figure out this technology for next year. There we go. All right, so a common fern, cinnamon ferns, okay? They give the stereotypical fern look. They're really easy to grow. They're clumpers, which is nice because they produce a nice full looking plant, but it stays in a nice little clump. And then they have these little cinnamon stick fertile fronds that come out the top, okay? Ferns, as you may know, they don't produce flowers, right? They're spore-bearing plants. So all of the leaves that you see on this are infertile, meaning they don't have spores. And then the sticks that come out the middle, the cinnamon sticks as they're called, that are coming out the middle, those are the fertile fronds. Those are the ones that actually have the spores on them, okay? You are not gonna get sick from the spores of the fern, by the way. I'm sure there's somebody out there that has an allergy to ferns, but I've never heard of it, okay? There's allergies to everything, so. Let's see, native to the eastern US and Canada, so it is a native plant, which is nice for those that are looking for the natives, okay? All right, this is a fun one, the dragon tail fern. It's a small natural hybrid between two different species. Evergreen fronds have an arching, spreading look and provide tons and tons of texture, as you can see. They almost look like something that you would find in like a tropical location. Hardy to zone 4, but you can also use them indoors in terrariums. So if there's people that are there that are like, ooh, that's really cool, I would love to bring something indoors, this would be a good selection for that, okay? They don't get too big. What's that? You can still see and hear me? There we go. All right. I'll just keep turning around. How's that? You can say hi to everybody. It should be on like a little turning thing. What is that, a lazy Susan? And just spin around. Stand. I'll just stand right here and I'll just broad sweep here. Everybody that's watching, I apologize if you're getting sick online. We don't see you online. Okay. You don't see me? I am there. I am here, I promise. All right, one more fern. If you don't see me, it's it's one of the little boxes or one of the little videos, whatever. All right, so the next one is the Godzilla lady fern. Kind of a funny name. It got its name because the fronds of this fern reminded the folks who gave it the name of Godzilla's spikes, if you've ever seen Godzilla, right? It's also a relatively large plant. The fronds get upwards of 3 feet long. So it is a little bit of a Godzilla, especially for a lady fern. But they're gorgeous plants. If you've not seen one, I highly recommend planting 1 or 10 in your garden because they're really cool looking plants. They can also handle a little bit of wear and tear more than others. So if you've got rabbits and squirrels running through the yard, they can handle a little bit more than other ferns. And they've got that silvery texture or silvery color along with the texture, which looks good again in those shady spots when you don't necessarily get a lot of other colors, right? Also, they look really good. Ferns look really good with rounded leaf plants like hostas. Okay. All right, jumping to sun perennials. This includes a wide range of sun-loving perennial plants. Most of your typical pollinator garden plants fall into this category. Okay, the broad majority of them are going to. Native species are the best choice for low maintenance and drought hardy. The reason being is the native plants are native, right? They've been around here for thousands and thousands of years, typically have deeper root systems. They're adapted for this climate. This climate has seen droughts before, right? It's been hot and cold and hot and cold. We've had droughts, we've had floods. They've adapted to that. And so native plants are always going to be the best choice if you want something that's going to be kind of hands-off, all right? All right, so non-native, Allium medusa, or the Medusa ornamental onion. Ornamental onions have gotten a little bit more attention in the last like 10 to 15 years, but there are tons and tons and tons of cultivars and species out there. Very, very easy to grow. They're a pollinator magnet for sure. If you haven't planted any of these in your yard, go ahead and do that. They will regrow from seed, so they will spread a little bit, especially if you spread the seeds and take care of the seedlings. They're resistant to herbivores because they're onions, and a lot of deer and rabbits and whatnot don't want to eat them. Okay, so you kind of just put them out there and they kind of do their thing. They are clumping plants, so they are going to typically stay in a little clump, but they will kind of expand a little bit over time. They get upwards of 2 feet tall in this cultivar and make a good choice for kind of like a mid-level planting. So not something right in the front, but something you can put toward the back a little bit. The other thing about a lot of the onions is they have hollow stems, and hollow stems are great for native bees, right? And all those native insects that want to find, they burrow into the stem and then they lay their eggs inside of there, okay? After they've dried out, not while they're alive. All right, now it's not working again. There we go. Baptisia, pink truffles, okay? False indigo is another name for these. This is a newer introduction of, not one that I've seen anyway, of false indigo. These are great plants. A lot of people really want to grow lupins or lupines. Baptisia look a lot like a lupine, but they are way easier to grow, okay? They have the bare lower stems, and so if you're selling plants like you're going to be doing at the plant sale, it's a really good opportunity to say, hey, these are going to have a stem that rises about a foot above the ground. It's going to be kind of bare. So it's a really great place to plant some other plants in front of it, so you don't see those bare stems, okay? So if you see somebody buying Baptisia, you can kind of sell along with it something that's going to be a little bit shorter and sits to the front of that Baptisia, okay? Seed pods in the fall, they've got these brown seed pods that kind of stick up. And so after everything has died off, the seed pods kind of stay standing with the stems, and provides a little bit of winter interest. And finally, they are legumes. And so they actually will help the soil out, right? They improve the soil with nitrogen fixing bacteria. Here's another newer introduction. This is bonfire cushion spurge. It's a type of euphorbia. This is another type of plant that nobody's going to eat. Euphorbias, you have to be careful with them that you don't get any of the sap around your mouth or nose or eyes, but you probably won't be doing that anyway, right? But rabbits and things don't want to eat them because they're toxic. They're not going to eat them. Most things won't eat them anyway. These also provide lots and lots of color. They'll put color throughout the season, and then they change to a rich purple color in the fall, which is pretty cool. And then, like most euphorbias, they're also drought tolerant. So everybody's talking about drought tolerance these days, right? Because we have such a weird changing climate going on. Not to mention we've had, La Nina and then El Nino. So it's an easy choice. They do produce kind of a little mound. I typically tell people to plant like 5 of them or so together. And so it kind of has a nice cushiony look to it. But great plants anyhow. All right, jumping to rock gardens. Rock gardens are basically just a term that is thrown out for any garden that has lots of rocks, okay? The reason I say that is because it is a grouping that we have, so I'm adding it in here. But a lot of times people have various meanings to what they're saying when they're talking about a rock garden. Some people are talking about alpine gardens. Some people are talking about Zen gardens. There's a lot of different gardens that are called rock gardens kind of colloquially, right? So if somebody comes up to you and say, I have a rock garden, I want to plant some plants in it, the best thing you can do is say, what kind of rock garden, okay? And then they will hopefully tell you or explain to you a little bit more. Typically, they're groupings of plants that are much smaller, right? No matter what type of rock garden, typically much smaller. They're growing among gravel and rocks, and you don't want to overpower the rocks with big giant plants, right? You want the rocks to kind of be dominant in the area. Often drought tolerant or capable of handling a little bit more intense sun and heat because they're around rocks and gravel and whatnot. And great for small places. They're easy to keep clean. It's just kind of one of those areas where people like to have something that's a very clean look to it. All right, so a few plants that do really well. This is a gentian, crested gentian. Gentians are really cool because they're some of the only flowers that are actually true blue. Okay, so there's lots of talk about blue roses. There's lots of talk about blue orchids and yada yada. Gentians are some of the only flowers that are actually blue. When they bloom, they're tiny, tiny little plants, but they're absolutely stunning. It's a really nice blue to see. They do well in hot and humid summers that we've got going on. There's lots and lots of different species of gentians, and I highly recommend, even past our plant sale, looking into them further. Come on, technology. All right. Gold Queen globe flowers. Anybody familiar with these? No? All right. Their flowers reach upwards of 3 feet tall and have nicely textured leaves, which is nice. Again, thinking texture. If you see somebody, by the way, they walk up to you and they've got a cart or whatever we're giving folks to walk around with the plants, and all of their plants are all rounded leaves, or all of their plants are grasses, or all of their plants have jagged leaves, you might recommend to them to say, hey, let's break up the texture with something that has a rounded leaf or whatever is different from what they've got. Okay. It's always nice to have extra texture in there. These guys, however, are grown, best grown in consistently moist soils. They look really, really nice next to ponds, and flowers make excellent cuttings. Okay. All right, Smoky Hills skullcaps, great for drought-tolerant selections. This one was actually found in Kansas. Produce low mounds of foliage and blooms for an extended period of time, and are again drought-tolerant. So these are great little plants to have in a rock garden when you just want something that's going to be kind of tucked away and not overwhelming in the space. Any questions from anybody? All doing okay? All right, Zone 5. This is called out in our catalog of plants as basically saying, hey, these are some newer introductions that more people can be growing. As we talked about, there's been an expansion of Zone 5 in Minnesota. Keep in mind, protection will still be required for a lot of plants, really kind of depending on where they're planted, how you planted them, what cultivar they are, all of those things that we talked about. And especially, we get a lot of wind, right? You look outside right now and it's pretty windy. During the winter, a lot of these Zone 5 plants would benefit from a little bit more protection, okay, from the winds, so that they don't desiccate. All right, Magnolia First Love. The reason I included this one out of our Zone 5 mix is because a lot of the magnolias that we have are just the little star magnolias, right? So they're all blooming and they're just kind of the standard white. Now that we're a lot more Zone 5, we can have a lot more of the pink magnolias, a little bit extra color. This one reaches about 15 feet tall, produces pink to purple and cream-petaled flowers. There we go. Narrower growth habit, so it's not going to be a big wide one. It's going to be nice and narrow. And again, it's just another pink/purple option for this far north, which is nice. All right, so this is the Amethyst Falls ornamental oregano. Very eye-catching. The flowers are kind of, I don't know, they remind me of shrimp for some reason. But they're kind of neat flowers. Lots of insects enjoy them. They're also, because it's an oregano, a lot of like deer and rabbits and whatnot won't touch it. They will if they're really hungry, but typically during the growing season, they're totally fine. And showy yet drought-tolerant plants. So they don't need a lot of upkeep. You don't really have to do a whole lot to them. You just kind of let them go and do their thing. All right, the next one is ice plants. This one was a little bit interesting to see because they are hardy to Zone 5. I will say that ice plants are going to need some protection from the snow in the wintertime. Okay, at least as far as I've been familiar with them, they're going to need something. They're low growing, they're drought tolerant, they're great for xeriscaping. Xeriscaping just means you're growing in but they use the term for like cactus and succulent beds. This is a type of succulent, by the way. This one is obviously, as you can tell by the name, they're golden or apricot colored flowers. Blooms late spring through the late summer. So they're an extended bloomer, which is nice. The other thing about the ice plants is if you have dogs and cats and squirrels and things that are going to be running through your yard, because they are kind of a succulent type plant, once you disturb or break off branches and whatnot, they look a little rough for a while until they can kind of grow it back in. You can easily take cuttings from them, which is nice, but definitely one of those things where you want to keep, especially if you have big dogs and stuff that are going to be running through, or kids, just kind of keep them out of the way. We had a question here online, are we saying, I'm not sure I understand the question here. How to snow protect these? How does snow protect these? The wooden tent, question mark. So the snow protects it by making sure that the temperature doesn't drop too far below, and it's keeping away the wind, basically. It's protecting them from the wind. Oh, yeah, no, we don't want to protect them from the snow. We want the snow to be on top of them. Yep. All right, jumping into annuals. We're running out of time here, so I apologize, folks. I'll try to speed up. Annuals, again, these are meant to grow 1 year and then die back. Some of them are going to be able, you can lift them or bring them indoors, or if you have them in pots, you can bring them indoors. And many annuals are going to reseed for the next year, right? Which is kind of ideal, especially if you have like a pollinator garden. You want your annuals, you're going to want to mix in the garden in the first place, but you're going to want them to reseed because they are going to grow just 1 year. You want them to replace themselves. So the first one here is a begonia, upright fire begonia. A lot of these hybrid begonias have gotten really good at handling the sun, which is fantastic, so that you don't have to worry about them being in full shade. These are brightly orange colored flowers. I don't know about this particular cultivar and its nectar content, but a lot of these are bred from wild begonias that are pollinated by hummingbirds. And hummingbirds are typically drawn to the orange kind of coral red colors. So if you have these in your yard or if you have them in hanging baskets, there's a chance that you'll have ruby-throated hummingbirds to come into them. The other thing is you can bring them indoors, right? They work excellent as houseplants. So at the end of the season, just bring them on indoors. Colocassias, also known as elephant ears. These produce huge leaves. Colocassias, there's a lot of hybridization going on, trying to get bigger, blacker leaves. I still consider them purple, but they're called black swan. And they're huge and they're beautiful, okay? They're a lot like your traditional green elephant ear. They just have that deep black color. The other thing about them is you can dig them in the fall, so let them kind of die back with a light frost, and then let them dry out and bring them indoors, and you can store them until the next season. Fuchsias, also known as fuchsia. Not your typical fuchsia, this one. The autumnale or autumnale, they're bright orange, and this picture doesn't actually show the orange as much as they do produce, but they have this really bright orange color to them as well, which is really nice. Great for hanging baskets, and if you haven't grown fuchsias in the past, you definitely should, because again, for folks looking for hummingbirds love fuchsias, okay? All right, jump into lilies. We've got a huge selection of lilies. We've got Martagon, Asiatic, Oriental, and trumpets all available. Martagon are the ones that are pictured here, and they're smaller, kind of the old-fashioned looking, kind of wild species type looking lilies. We've got Asiatic lilies. They're shorter plants with upward facing blooms. Then Oriental lilies are typically a little bit taller with slightly downward facing blooms. And then you've got the trumpet lilies, which are usually much larger plants, often called Easter lilies. They're all fantastic plants. Some of the larger ones are going to need to be staked. So they get really, really big, and especially if they're in an open position, they're going to need staking. So you might want to talk to people about that as well. If you see them coming and buying some of the larger lilies, just let them know, as a courtesy to say, hey, you might need to stake these, not necessarily this year, but the next year as well, okay? Peonies, there are 3 main types of peonies. We've got the herbaceous, which are the ones that everybody's familiar with. We have tree peonies, which are not nearly as common as they should be, which produce 3 to 5 foot tall woody stems that last for many years. I love tree peonies. They're so cool. They're beautiful, and they've got really nice textured leaves. And then there's intersectional. Intersectional lilies are hybrids between the herbaceous and the tree peonies, which is a really difficult hybrid to make. A lot of them are named after Ito, which is a Japanese breeder. And so if you see Ito peony, it's the same thing as intersectional peony. And the great thing about them is they grow a lot more like an herbaceous, but they've got a thicker stem. And so they sometimes do, but they don't typically require the staking that peonies will, right? Everybody knows that once the peonies are blooming and then we have a heavy rain and everything falls over, and you're like, well, see you next year. The really cool thing about the intersectionals is you don't have to do that as much, if ever. So a couple to call out here. Coral sunset peony. This is an herbaceous. Gets upwards of 3 feet tall, and is said to have some fragrance. Okay, I can't smell very well, but peonies are the smells I can smell from peonies are pretty fantastic.
Hey, quick question on peonies.
Yes.
When you buy a peony, I only have the peonies that came with my house and I really don't want to buy them because I hear that they take 3 years to bloom. If you planted one from our plant sale, how long would it take to get blooms?
So it typically is only an issue if you've taken them out of the soil and they're like bare root and they've been kind of, heavily affected by the change. But usually it's only just a year of kind of getting settled into their space. And they're not going to produce a whole lot of, blooms that first year, but the years after that, they'll kind of increase, exponentially, really.
So you might get a couple blooms this year if
Well,
you
this
buy
year,
a new one.
yeah, so if it depends on the time that you planted, if it's been in the pot for a couple years, they've been growing it in the pot and it's feeling like it's pretty settled, it may end up blooming. Typically, there's smaller blooms or they'll abort the bloom, and so it'll be a little bloom bud and then it just never actually opens. That happens a lot. But typically, if you get it in the ground early enough, and if the plant is secured enough, you haven't really messed with the root system. It gives it enough time throughout the entire growing season that you could have something the next year. But again, usually it's another year after that, and then you get kind of the full set of blooms. Does that answer your question, Sarah?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. All right. All right, the next one, Going Bananas. I added this one because it's kind of a fun name, and it's a bright yellow. Deep scarlet flowers with the center. Now these ones changed colors a little bit too, by the way, is from what I've read. They're supposedly not going to need staking. The staking is usually something that happens because the blooms themselves are so large. So what's nice about some of them that have the interior, the flower is scarlet, by the way. The single flowered peonies is they don't get so heavy and they don't fall over. Okay. And the leaves of these look like the tree peonies, so they're a little bit more jagged, a little bit different color, or a little bit different texture to them. Another one, here's a smaller plant. This is another herbaceous, short mounds of lacy leaves, bright red flowers that sometimes are going to need staking according to what I've read about them. All right. We have lots of different tree peony, or not tree peony, sorry, peonies available on the list. And so highly recommend taking a look at them. All right, jump into roses. We are at 1 hour, by the way. I apologize. I'll try to get through this a little bit quicker. Let's see, roses. Mini roses not fully hardy in Minnesota, which keeps us very limited. But there's a lot of new things that are being developed. A lot of what we have are shrub roses, which are going to have kind of a shorter stature. And remember that even the climbing roses, they're not technically climbers. They kind of just fall and ramble over things, okay? That's actually why they have the thorns. It helps them keep upright. So here's an example of, they do this with roses all over the place with the funky names. So you see it's Bytown, I believe. And then it's called Paint the Town is the series name. So bright red, hybrid tea type. Hybrid teas don't typically grow very well up here, so that they're trying to develop newer cultivars that have that kind of similar look. Dark green foliage grows to only 2 to 4 feet tall. So these are kind of the smaller shrub type. This is the red Ramblin' Rose, disease-resistant cultivar with dark green leaves, bright red flowers, and this would be a climbing rose. By climbing, again, you're going to need to stake it. And if you have some sort of trellis or something, you kind of have to wind them through as they grow, and then they'll kind of hold in place after that. All right, campfire or shrub rose. This again is another smaller one, only 3 feet by 3 feet. Resistant to black spot. If you've grown roses in the Midwest, you know what black spot is. It just is a fungal infection that gets all over everything. It's not necessarily going to kill your plants, by the way. It's usually on lower foliage. So they're trying to produce a lot more resistant hybrids out there. Produces yellow and pink flowers. Really, really pretty. All right, jumping to vines. Some vines become woody and climb on their own, while others need support. Grapes require some pruning, so keep that in mind. Everybody wants to grow grapes at home, right? They do require a little bit of work, so just let people know that. They're not hard work. It's just normal work with pruning, and sometimes a little bit of fungicide and whatnot, but they're relatively easy to grow otherwise. Wisteria. If they want to plant a wisteria, make sure they're planting the wisteria in a place that is okay with being a little bit messy after the flowers start to disintegrate, and B is going to be a place that actually can support the weight of a wisteria. Wisterias get huge. So an example that we're going to have here is that Hydrangea petiolaris. This is a climbing hydrangea. This is another plant. For some reason, it's just not very popular. They're gorgeous plants. They look amazing climbing up the sides of trees. One thing that it does that is kind of goofy about them, or it takes a little bit of getting used to, is they do take time to get established. You plant one, it is going to take 3 or 4 years before it really gets going. Okay. All right. Ooh, got a window opening. A little bit windy up here. All right, Somerset grape. Thank you very much for closing that. A very hardy seedless grape, table grape, by the way. So this one's for eating. Bred in Wisconsin. Produces ruby red fruits with exceptionally sweet flavor. Okay, we do have quite a few table grapes on the menu. This is the wisteria. This is Betty Matthews. This is a Kentucky wisteria. Large vines, again, they grow to about 20 feet tall, if not more, and they will wrap around things on their own. They'll grow and wrap around on their own. So whatever it is that they're growing around needs to be strong, okay? Very cold hardy. They do produce lots of flowers, which are nice, but very, very vigorous plants. All right, jump into trees and shrubs. We have a broad range of trees and shrubs available to sale. Stick with what you know. The reason I'm saying that is because you're going to have a lot of questions about trees and shrubs, and people are going to ask you, I've got this space, and can I plant this here? And they're not going to give you enough information, okay? And you're not going to know enough about the tree. So just stick with what you know. And if you don't know, it's totally fine to go somebody who does. We're going to have horticulturists, we're going to have naturalists, we're going to have all kinds of folks. So if you don't know the answer to the question, go to one of our horticulturists and ask them, okay? The worst thing to do is to tell somebody, yeah, this will look great in that spot and it'll do really well. And then it dies on them, and then they're like, oh, the people at the Arboretum didn't know what they're talking about. Or they get this monster of a tree that shouldn't be in that space, okay? So if you don't know, please go to a horticulturist, because trees are an investment, right? You plant a tree for the next generation, okay? All right, so one of our trees here that's going to be available, these are really cool hybrids. As you can see by the leaves, they look a lot like a Japanese maple, but they are not a Japanese maple. They're actually a hybrid with a Korean maple. And they've got those really pretty palmate leaves, but they are hardy here. Okay, so you get that same look, not necessarily the same fall color, but you do get the same look as a Japanese maple with a hardier plant. Okay, they do benefit from some winter protection, i.e. if you have a fence on the west side of the tree, it'll help to block the wind during the winter, okay? All right, Triumph apples, University of Minnesota introduction from 2021. This is a cross between the Honeycrisp and Liberty. Keep in mind that most apples are going to require a pollinator. That's most of the apricots and all of those trees, most of them anyway, require some sort of other plant to cross with, okay? So if you see somebody come up and they only have one apple, it's a really good time to say, hey, you need another apple, okay? All right, this is a cool selection. This is a hybrid oak, and as you can see, it's a columnar oak, okay? The columnar oaks are relatively new within the last 20 years or so. They're becoming a little bit more popular, but they're great for if you want an oak in a space that doesn't have a lot of space for an oak, right? And they have the undersides of the leaves are silvery, so in the wind, they kind of have the twinkling effect a little bit as you would with like an aspen. All right, jump into ornamental grasses. Grasses are really, really hardy, resistant to deer and rabbits, which is really nice. So if you have lots of deer and rabbits in your area, grasses are a good choice. Used by many animals as shelter and nesting materials. Many are very drought resistant once established. Jumping in, so this is a native species. This is our big blue stem. This is a purple selection. So unlike the wild type big blue stem, it's not the green, it has the darker color. A lot of the purple grasses that have been available in the past have been non-hardy grasses that are perennial in other locations, just not this far north. So what's nice about some of these selections that we have now are that they are purple, giving you that same look and giving some color in the yard, but being a native plant. Panicum virgatum, this is the Cheyenne sky. These are gorgeous, much more color than the straight species, which again is a native. They do reseed a little bit, but they're not weedy. And they're really easy to control if you do get them in a space that you don't really want them. But beautiful plants, and again, they've got a lot of nice color. This is the Tara prairie drop seed. It's the shorter version of the straight species, so it's only going to get it to about 2 feet tall, which means that the seed heads, the flower heads, aren't going to fall over as much. Fall color is a rusty brown, and it holds up pretty well in the winter. And then they're great for sunny, dry locations. Mary, I will get to that question toward the end here. I'm going to try to breeze through this real quick. Jumping through herbs. All right, there's a wide variety of herbs available. We do have some listings on them, I believe is what it looked like in the catalog anyway. A for annuals, AR for aromatherapy, and yada yada. You can see the list there. Couple of selections, or the herb-like plants anyway, that you can use these, but this is the Montrose white catmint. Not just for cats, these plants are excellent for pollinators. Okay, a lot of the mint species produce tiny, tiny little flowers, and pollinators, specifically the little tiny native bees, absolutely love them. You can dry them and use them for cat toys. Perennial plants that will reseed, and they can become weedy, but they typically don't. All right, a lavender. This is a nice selection. Lavender, one of those things that people would love to grow more up here. We're just, again, it's a little bit cold for most of them, but there's a lot of English lavenders that do well. The Nico is a hardy selection. You can use it to extract oil, smells really great, and bumblebees absolutely love them, and, as well as honeybees. Again, I'm trying to breeze through this a little bit faster than before. All right, if somebody comes up to you and they're looking for basil, this is the basil that they're looking for if they're wanting to put it on like pizzas and whatnot, right? The Genovese is the Italian basil, grows to about 2 feet tall. They do need to be trimmed. There's lots and lots of YouTube videos out there on how to trim basil. You can't just let it grow, okay? You do have to trim it periodically, otherwise it bolts, which means it goes to flower. And if it bolts, then the plant dies, okay? So you can keep them going relatively well throughout the season, but it's also great to get lots and lots of plants. The thing about herbs is that you end up using a lot more of the plant than you realize. And so you'll buy like 2 plants, and then you realize after like having, one homemade pizza that you've used your entire plant, right? So buy lots and lots of herbs. All right, veggies and fruits. Specifically with tomatoes, I wanted to call out the fact that they come in 3 main types these days. You've got indeterminate, which are the vining, which means they just keep growing and growing and growing until basically the end of the season. You've got determinate, or what are referred to as bush tomatoes. They're said to not require staking, but they still do best if you do give them some staking. And then you've got the short internode, which are the dwarf vining. So they've just got shorter internodes, the shorter space between the leaves on the stem. Very, very, fantastic plants, the short internode. They're often, there's a series of them called Huskies. So if you're familiar with those, that's what that is. All right, a few tomatoes. Celebrity hybrid tomato, one of the best-selling hybrids out there. I point this one out because if people are looking for just an easy-to-grow tomato, that is their tomato, okay? This is by far the easiest. It's got good flavor. You can use it for a wide variety of foods. And it's a semi-determinate. So it kind of has that intermediate growth to it. Mortgage lifter, if you're looking for something other than Brandywine that'll do really well and produce nice big heirloom tomatoes, mortgage lifter is a really good selection. The fruits can get upwards of 1 pound, which is pretty amazing. And this was an introduction that was back from the 1930s. So it's been going on for a long, long time. Next one is Sun Gold hybrid tomatoes. If you've never had Sun Gold, I highly recommend planting Sun Gold this year. These are amazing. My kids will eat these straight off the vine, and they are absolutely fantastic plants. The fruits are really, really sweet. Here is one of the ones that I was referring to earlier that they're breeding a lot of new cultivars, new hybrids that look like the heirlooms. So this is one of those selections. Basically, it's kind of hard to see from the photo there, but it's got a little bit of modeling in the skin of the fruit. And what they're doing is they're making it more appetizing on the dinner plate, right? The plate by having different colors, different shades, different stripes, modeling, that sort of thing. All right, and now Sugar Baby watermelon. If people are looking for watermelons and something easy to grow, this is a great choice. These are icebox watermelons. The term icebox, by the way, comes from the fact that they're really small and you can put them in a icebox, right? Upwards of about 12 pounds per fruit, which is not a lot for a watermelon. And the plants themselves are not ginormous, okay? It's not like growing a pumpkin, right? They're actually quite a bit smaller, smaller plants. And it takes roughly about 75 days for them to get up and go and be ready to go. All right, jalapenos. By the way, it's not jalapeno, it is jalapeno. This cultivar is called Jalapeno M. This is an improved selection of the standard jalapeno. These are what you want for salsas and tacos and anything Mexican, right? It's kind of your standard Mexican dish pepper. Okay. Give them as much heat as possible. They do really well up against a heat sink. So like up against a nice warm wall. Peppers need lots of time to get going and typically don't start producing their fruit until the end of the season. We do have a couple of really hot selections. This one is the Carolina Reaper, and these are the world's hottest pepper, okay? You do have to be careful with these. When they first came out, I was working in retail, and we actually had people sign little waivers about them. Once they produce fruit, you do not want to touch the fruit or pick the fruit barehanded, because the capsaicin will get on your hands and it'll burn your eyes and your mouth and any other body part. So they are very, 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 very hot, okay? Come on. We may be at the end. That may be why I think we're at the end, folks. Yep, we're at the end. All right, any questions in here? Good, all right. Mary P, you had a question. The deer clipped the tops of my trees. Is there any hope for them or should I just replace them? Mary, it depends on the type of tree, actually. I don't know what type of tree, but if you want to email, that goes for anybody on this call. If you want to email me with questions, carwood at carwood@umn.edu. I would be glad to try to answer any questions I can. All right. All right, folks. Yes, ma'am.
Where will the video be available?
We will probably send it out to anybody who has signed up online, or you can, again, email me and we'll go ahead and get that to you.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, folks. Well, thank you, everybody online. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I appreciate it. And hopefully this worked out well for you. By the way, I want to improve this for next year. So if you have ideas about how we can improve this whole entire thing, this pre-sale plant talk, please do let me know. I'm all ears about what we can do.
Thank you. Are you
All right.
gonna make the PowerPoint presentation available?
We can do that. Yep, we can make it available.
That
Yep,
would be helpful.
for sure. All right, folks. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, I tell you, I've only worn, I have